The morning of September 13, 1944, broke cold and gray across the jagged peaks of the Apennine Mountains, where Staff Sergeant Anthony Rosetti of the 88th Infantry Division's Artillery Forward Observer Team crouched behind a pile of shattered limestone, adjusting his SCR 610 radio while scanning the German defensive positions that crowned Monte Battaglia like a medieval fortress. At 26, Rosetti had been calling in fire missions for 8 months across the length of Italy, from the bloody beaches of Anzio to the rubble-strewn streets of Rome, but nothing in his extensive combat experience had prepared him for the magnitude of defensive preparations that the Wehrmacht had constructed along the Gothic Line. The Gothic Line represented Germany's final major defensive barrier in Italy, a carefully engineered fortress system that stretched 200 miles across the Italian peninsula from the Ligurian Sea to the Adriatic coast. The 14th Army under Generaloberst Joachim Lemelsen had spent 6 months constructing interlocking defensive positions that exploited every ridge, valley, and mountain peak to create killing zones designed to stop the Allied advance toward the Po Valley and northern Italy. The systematic fortifications included reinforced concrete bunkers, interconnected tunnel systems, and precisely positioned artillery observation posts that provided overlapping fields of fire across all likely Allied approach routes. Rosetti's forward observer team supported the 88th Infantry Division's 2nd Battalion, 350th Infantry Regiment, as part of Lieutenant General Mark Clark's 5th Army assault against the Gothic Line central sector. The division had earned the nickname Blue Devils during previous campaigns in Italy, accumulating extensive experience in mountain warfare and coordinated attacks against prepared German positions. However, the Gothic Line represented a defensive challenge that exceeded anything the 88th Infantry Division had previously encountered during 18 months of continuous combat operations. The strategic importance of the Gothic Line extended far beyond immediate tactical considerations to encompass German efforts to delay Allied victory in Europe while resources were diverted to counter Soviet advances on the Eastern Front. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring commanded Army Group C with explicit orders to hold the Italian front using minimum forces, enabling the transfer of veteran divisions to more critical theaters. The defensive strategy required maximizing the defensive value of Italian terrain while inflicting maximum casualties on Allied forces attempting to break through to northern Italy. Monte Battaglia dominated the approaches to the Gothic Line's central sector, rising 715 meters above sea level to provide commanding observation over the Santerno and Senio river valleys. The German 356th Infantry Division had fortified the mountain during 6 months of preparation, constructing reinforced positions that incorporated natural caves and rocky formations into an integrated defensive system. The 88mm anti-aircraft guns positioned on Monte Battaglia's summit provided both anti-aircraft defense and devastating direct fire capability against Allied ground forces. Rosetti had been observing German defensive preparations for 3 days from concealed positions on Monte Capello, documenting the systematic deployment of weapons and personnel that revealed the sophistication of Wehrmacht defensive planning. His reports to the 913th Field Artillery Battalion described precisely positioned machine gun nests, mortar positions, and artillery observation posts that covered every possible approach to Monte Battaglia. The accumulated intelligence painted a picture of defensive preparations that would require overwhelming Allied superiority to overcome. Captain Robert Mitchell commanded the forward observer teams supporting artillery, the 913th Field Artillery Battalion equipped with 155mm howitzers positioned in carefully camouflaged firing positions near Firenzuola. Mitchell was a regular Army officer with extensive experience in artillery operations, having served with the 88th Infantry Division since its activation in 1942. His technical expertise in fire direction and target analysis made him invaluable for coordinating the massive artillery preparations required for Gothic Line assault operations. The 88th Infantry Division's assault plan called for coordinated attacks by 3 battalions against different sectors of Monte Battaglia, supported by the largest artillery concentration assembled by 5th Army during the Italian campaign. The preliminary bombardment would include fires from 12 artillery battalions totaling over 200 guns, supplemented by tactical air support from P-47 Thunderbolt fighter bombers operating from airfields near Florence. The systematic fire plan addressed every known German position while attempting to neutralize the defensive advantages provided by Monte Battaglia's terrain. Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison commanded the 2nd Battalion, 350th Infantry Regiment, responsible for the main assault against Monte Battaglia's western approaches. Harrison was a West Point graduate who had led his battalion through previous operations at Anzio, Rome, and the advance to the Arno River, accumulating extensive experience in mountain warfare and coordinated attacks against prepared positions. His tactical knowledge suggested that the Gothic Line assault would prove significantly more difficult than previous operations due to the systematic nature of German defensive preparations. Rosetti positioned his observation post at 0530 hours on September 13th, establishing communication with the 913th Field Artillery Battalion while beginning systematic observation of German positions on Monte Battaglia. His SCR 610 radio provided reliable communication with supporting fires despite the mountainous terrain that created reception problems for less powerful equipment. The forward observer's mission required precise identification of targets while maintaining concealment from German observation posts that dominated the surrounding terrain. The German defensive positions on Monte Battaglia reflected 18 months of tactical evolution during the Italian campaign, incorporating lessons learned from previous Allied breakthrough operations at Cassino, Anzio, and Rome. The 356th Infantry Division had studied Allied tactical procedures extensively, developing countermeasures that addressed American artillery tactics, infantry assault techniques, and air support coordination. The systematic defensive preparations demonstrated professional competence that exceeded Allied expectations for German forces operating with limited resources. Private First Class Michael Chen, Rosetti's radio operator, maintained communication nets with battalion headquarters while monitoring German radio traffic that provided intelligence about enemy defensive preparations. Chen was a second-generation Chinese-American from San Francisco who had volunteered for combat duty despite facing discrimination in civilian employment. His technical expertise in radio operations and fluency in multiple languages made him valuable for intelligence gathering and communication coordination during complex operations. The preliminary artillery bombardment commenced at 0600 hours with systematic fires against identified German positions throughout the Monte Battaglia defensive sector. The 913th Field Artillery Battalion delivered precisely planned fires using high-explosive shells and white phosphorus rounds designed to neutralize enemy personnel while destroying defensive works. Rosetti observed the bombardment effects through his binoculars, noting that German positions had been constructed to withstand heavy artillery fire through the use of reinforced concrete and natural rock formations. The 88mm anti-aircraft guns positioned on Monte Battaglia's summit represented the most dangerous threat to the 88th Infantry Division's assault operations, capable of delivering devastating direct fire against advancing infantry while maintaining their primary air defense mission. The weapons were served by experienced Luftwaffe personnel who had accumulated extensive combat experience during defensive operations throughout the Italian campaign. Their positioning provided overlapping fields of fire that covered all approaches to the German defensive positions. Oberst Wilhelm Schmalz commanded the 356th Infantry Division's defense of the Gothic Line central sector, implementing tactical procedures that maximized the defensive value of mountainous terrain while conserving limited personnel and ammunition. Schmalz was a veteran officer who had served in mountain warfare operations in Norway and the Caucasus, developing expertise in defensive operations that exploited natural obstacles and prepared positions. His professional competence enabled effective coordination of limited resources against overwhelming Allied material superiority. The artillery preparation continued for 2 hours with methodical precision, as American gunners delivered pre-planned fires against every significant German position identified through reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. The systematic bombardment included counter-battery fires against detected enemy artillery positions, while tactical air support from P-47 Thunderbolt aircraft supplemented ground-based fires with 500-pound bombs and napalm. The coordination between different supporting arms demonstrated improved Allied tactical procedures developed during 18 months of Italian campaign operations. Rosetti documented the limited effectiveness of Allied artillery fires against German defensive positions, noting that Wehrmacht engineers had constructed fortifications specifically designed to withstand heavy bombardment. The reinforced concrete bunkers and tunnel systems provided protection against all but direct hits by the largest caliber shells, while the natural rock formations of Monte Battaglia absorbed explosive effects without significant structural damage. His observations suggested that the preliminary bombardment would not achieve the level of destruction required for successful infantry assault. The 2nd Battalion, 350th Infantry Regiment began its advance toward Monte Battaglia at 0800 hours, with Company E leading the assault against German positions on the mountain's western slopes. The infantry advanced in coordinated bounds using terrain features for concealment while maintaining communication with supporting artillery through Rosetti's forward observer team. The systematic approach reflected extensive training in mountain warfare techniques developed during previous operations in Italian terrain. Staff Sergeant David Murphy led Company E's 2nd Platoon in the initial assault, advancing through broken terrain toward German positions that had survived the preliminary bombardment. Murphy was a veteran Anzio who had served with the 88th Infantry Division since its deployment to Italy, accumulating extensive experience in small unit tactics and leadership under fire. His combat knowledge suggested that the German defensive positions would prove significantly more formidable than intelligence assessments had indicated. The first indication of German defensive strength came at 0815 hours when concealed machine gun positions opened fire on the advancing American infantry from camouflage bunkers that had not been detected during reconnaissance operations. The Maskeningewehre 42 weapons delivered devastating automatic fire that forced the attacking troops to seek cover while calling for artillery support against the newly revealed positions. Rosetti immediately began adjusting fire missions to neutralize the machine gun nests while maintaining communication with the advancing infantry. The German 356th Infantry Division's defensive plan called for allowing Allied forces to advance into predetermined killing zones before revealing concealed weapons positions and calling down pre-registered artillery fires. The tactical procedure had been refined during previous defensive operations in Italy, maximizing casualties among attacking forces while conserving limited German ammunition and personnel. The systematic implementation of defensive fires demonstrated professional competence that Allied intelligence had underestimated. Captain Mitchell coordinated artillery fires against newly identified German positions while maintaining support for the advancing infantry battalions throughout the 88th Infantry Division sector. The complexity of fire mission coordination in mountainous terrain required precise calculation of trajectory and fusing to avoid friendly fire incidents while achieving maximum effect against enemy positions. Mitchell's technical expertise enabled effective artillery support despite the challenging tactical conditions created by Monte Battaglia's terrain. The assault against Monte Battaglia's western slopes continued throughout the morning as American infantry fought to advance against determined German resistance, supported by precisely positioned defensive fires. The 88mm guns on the mountain's summit engaged individual targets with devastating accuracy, while concealed mortar positions delivered indirect fires that had been pre-registered against likely assembly areas and approach routes. The systematic coordination of German defensive fires exceeded Allied expectations based on previous operations in Italy. Lieutenant Robert Foster commanded Company E's advance against the most heavily fortified German positions on Monte Battaglia's northwestern ridge, leading his men through intense defensive fire while attempting to maintain tactical cohesion. Foster was a former college football player from Ohio who had been commissioned through Officer Candidate School 18 months earlier, accumulating combat experience during the advance from Anzio to Rome. His leadership abilities and tactical knowledge enabled Company E to maintain forward progress despite overwhelming German defensive advantages. Rosetti adjusted artillery fires continuously throughout the morning engagement, calling down high-explosive and white phosphorus rounds against German positions while avoiding friendly troops advancing through broken terrain. His communication with the 913th Field Artillery Battalion required precise target identification and careful coordination to prevent fratricidal incidents in the close-quarters fighting that characterized mountain combat. The forward observer's expertise proved crucial for maintaining artillery support during the complex tactical situation. The German defensive positions on Monte Battaglia included interconnected tunnel systems that enabled personnel movement between different firing positions without exposure to Allied observation and artillery fire. The underground network had been constructed using forced labor during 6 months of preparation, incorporating natural cave systems with engineered passages that provided protected communication routes. The systematic fortification demonstrated German engineering competence while maximizing defensive capabilities despite limited resources. Private Chun monitored German radio communications throughout the assault, providing Rosetti with intelligence about enemy tactical responses and defensive coordination. The intercepted messages revealed systematic German procedures for calling defensive fires and coordinating counterattacks, while also indicating the presence of reserve forces that had not been detected during Allied reconnaissance operations. Chen's linguistic abilities and technical expertise contributed significantly to the forward observer team's tactical effectiveness. The 88th Infantry Division's assault reached its culminating point at 1,100 hours, when advancing American forces encountered the main German defensive line, approximately 400 meters below Monte Battaglia's summit. The Wehrmacht positions included reinforced bunkers armed with machine guns and anti-tank weapons, supported by mortar positions and the devastating 88mm guns that dominated all approaches to the objective. The systematic defensive coordination prevented further Allied advance while inflicting heavy casualties on the attacking infantry. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison recognized that his battalion faced tactical circumstances that exceeded their capabilities without additional support and ammunition resupply. The German defensive positions had proven more formidable than intelligence estimates suggested, while the systematic coordination of enemy fires demonstrated professional competence that Allied planners had not anticipated. Harrison's tactical experience indicated that continued assault operations would result in prohibitive casualties without achieving the assigned objectives. The tactical situation facing the 88th Infantry Division reflected broader problems confronting Fifth Army operations against the Gothic Line throughout September 1944. The systematic German defensive preparations had created tactical conditions that favored defensive operations while negating Allied advantages in artillery and air support. The Wehrmacht's professional competence in defensive warfare had been underestimated by Allied intelligence, creating unrealistic expectations for breakthrough operations. Rosetti observed German counterattack preparations at 1,130 hours when enemy forces began moving reinforcements toward sectors where Allied penetrations threatened defensive positions. The systematic German response included precisely coordinated artillery fires and tactical air support from Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters that had maintained air superiority over the Gothic Line despite overwhelming Allied numerical advantages. The professional coordination of German defensive operations exceeded expectations based on previous Italian campaign experiences. The 356th Infantry Division's counterattack commenced at 1,200 hours with coordinated assault by reserve companies supported by self-propelled artillery and the devastating 88mm guns positioned on Monte Battaglia's summit. The German forces demonstrated tactical competence and aggressive leadership that forced American troops to withdraw from advanced positions while calling for additional artillery support. The systematic nature of enemy operations suggested extensive planning and rehearsal rather than improvised defensive responses. Staff Sergeant Murphy attempted to hold advanced positions with the remnants of his platoon, but overwhelming German firepower and tactical coordination made effective defense impossible. The systematic enemy counterattack included supporting fires from multiple weapon systems while infantry assault teams advanced through terrain that provided concealment from Allied observation. Murphy's combat experience suggested that his unit faced annihilation unless immediate withdrawal was authorized. Captain Mitchell coordinated defensive artillery fires in support of withdrawing American forces, delivering high-explosive shells against German assault troops while attempting to disrupt enemy coordination. The complexity of fire mission coordination during fluid tactical situations required precise timing and accurate target identification to support friendly forces while avoiding fratricidal incidents. Mitchell's technical expertise enabled effective artillery support despite the challenging conditions created by close-quarters mountain combat. The German counterattack achieved tactical success by 12:30 hours, forcing American forces to withdraw from advanced positions while inflicting heavy casualties on the 88th Infantry Division's assault battalions. The systematic coordination of Wehrmacht defensive operations demonstrated professional military competence that validated 6 months of preparation and fortification work. The tactical results exceeded German expectations while confirming the defensive value of properly prepared mountain positions. Rosetti documented the tactical failure of the 88th Infantry Division's assault against Monte Battaglia, providing detailed observations about German defensive capabilities and tactical procedures. His after-action report described systematic enemy preparations that had not been adequately addressed during Allied planning, while also noting the professional competence displayed by Wehrmacht forces despite their strategic disadvantages. The forward observer's analysis contributed to revised tactical procedures for subsequent Gothic Line operations. Lieutenant Foster led the withdrawal of Company E's survivors from the advanced positions around Monte Battaglia, conducting a fighting retreat through terrain dominated by German observation and artillery fire. The systematic enemy pursuit demonstrated tactical competence while maintaining pressure on retreating American forces to prevent consolidation of secondary defensive positions. Foster's leadership abilities enabled his reduced company to maintain tactical cohesion despite heavy casualties and overwhelming enemy pressure. The broader tactical situation along the Gothic Line reflected similar German defensive successes throughout the Fifth Army sector, as Wehrmacht forces demonstrated systematic resistance that exceeded Allied expectations. The 91st Infantry Division encountered comparable defensive preparations at Monte Altuzzo, while the 34th Infantry Division faced determined resistance near Mongadoro. The coordinated German defense validated months of preparation while demonstrating continued tactical competence despite strategic disadvantages. Private Chen established communication with battalion headquarters to report the tactical situation and request additional artillery support for the withdrawing forces. His technical expertise enabled reliable radio communication despite German jamming efforts and the challenging terrain that created reception problems for less experienced operators. Chen's professional competence contributed to maintaining coordination during the complex tactical situation facing the 88th Infantry Division. The German 88mm guns continued to dominate the battlefield throughout the afternoon, delivering devastating direct fire against any Allied movement within their extensive range and field of fire. The weapon's dual capability as anti-aircraft and anti-tank guns made them invaluable for defensive operations, while their positioning on Monte Battaglia's summit provided observation and fire control over vast areas of the Allied approach routes. The systematic employment of these weapons validated German defensive planning. General Oberst Lemelson reviewed tactical reports from the 14th Army's defensive sectors, recognizing that Wehrmacht forces had achieved significant tactical success against Allied breakthrough attempts throughout the Gothic Line. The systematic German resistance had inflicted heavy casualties on attacking forces while maintaining defensive positions that controlled access to the Po Valley. Lemelson's professional assessment indicated that the Gothic Line could be held indefinitely provided adequate ammunition and personnel replacements were available. The casualty reports from the 88th Infantry Division's assault on Monte Battaglia documented the human cost of attacking prepared defensive positions without adequate preparation or realistic assessment of enemy capabilities. Company E suffered 70% casualties during 6 hours of combat, while the battalion's overall losses exceeded 50% of authorized strength. The systematic German defensive success had achieved maximum Allied casualties while preserving Wehrmacht combat capability for continued operations. Lieutenant General Clark received preliminary reports about the Fifth Army's limited success against Gothic Line defensive positions, recognizing that his forces faced tactical challenges that exceeded previous Italian campaign experiences. The systematic German resistance suggested that breakthrough operations would require fundamental changes in Allied tactical procedures and significantly increased resource allocation. Clark's strategic assessment indicated that the Gothic Line assault would continue for weeks rather than days. Rosetti established a new observation post 800 meters farther from Monte Battaglia, recognizing that German defensive capabilities made closer positions untenable for continued artillery support operations. His tactical experience indicated that the Wehrmacht forces possessed systematic defensive coordination that would prevent Allied breakthrough without overwhelming material superiority. The forward observer's professional assessment contributed to revised tactical planning for subsequent operations. The tactical lessons learned during the Gothic Line assault influenced Allied planning for the remainder of the Italian campaign, emphasizing the continued effectiveness of German defensive operations despite strategic disadvantages. The systematic Wehrmacht resistance demonstrated professional military competence that required corresponding improvements in Allied tactical procedures and resource allocation. The operational experience provided valuable insights into the requirements for successful offensive operations against prepared defensive positions. Staff Sergeant Murphy reached American lines with 8 surviving members of his original 37-man platoon, providing detailed intelligence about German defensive capabilities and tactical procedures observed during the assault on Monte Battaglia. His first-hand observations confirmed that Wehrmacht forces retained significant combat effectiveness despite months of strategic retreat and resource limitations. Murphy's survival and subsequent service illustrated individual resilience under extreme tactical conditions. The German defensive success at Monte Battaglia represented broader Wehrmacht tactical competence throughout the Gothic Line sector, validating 6 months of systematic preparation and fortification work. The 356th Infantry Division's performance demonstrated professional military skill that maximized defensive advantages while inflicting maximum casualties on Allied assault forces. The tactical results exceeded German strategic expectations while confirming the continued effectiveness of properly conducted defensive operations. Captain Mitchell coordinated artillery support for subsequent operations against the Gothic Line, applying lessons learned during the Monte Battaglia assault to improve fire support effectiveness. His technical expertise and combat experience contributed to revised artillery procedures that addressed German defensive capabilities more realistically. Mitchell's professional competence enabled continued artillery support despite the challenging tactical conditions created by Wehrmacht defensive preparations. The broader strategic implications of Gothic Line defensive operations extended beyond immediate tactical considerations to influence Allied planning for the remainder of World War II in Europe. The systematic German resistance demonstrated continued Wehrmacht tactical competence while requiring significant Allied resource allocation that could have been used in other theaters. The defensive success validated German strategic planning while confirming the continued military value of properly prepared defensive positions. Private Chun continued serving with forward observer teams throughout the remainder of the Italian campaign, applying technical expertise and combat experience gained during Gothic Line operations. His professional competence in radio communications and intelligence gathering contributed to improved coordination between infantry and artillery units during subsequent mountain warfare operations. Chen's service illustrated the individual technical skills that characterized American military effectiveness despite tactical setbacks. The 88th Infantry Division eventually achieved limited tactical success against Monte Battaglia through systematic artillery preparation and coordinated assault by multiple battalions, but the operation required 3 weeks of continuous combat and cost over 2,000 casualties. The German defensive positions were finally overcome through overwhelming material superiority rather than tactical innovation, validating Wehrmacht defensive planning while demonstrating the ultimate effectiveness of Allied resource advantages. Lieutenant Foster received promotion to captain based on his leadership during the Monte Battaglia assault, subsequently commanding Company E during the remainder of the Gothic Line campaign. His tactical experience and professional competence contributed to improved small unit leadership while providing continuity during personnel replacement operations. Foster's survival and continued service demonstrated individual adaptation to the extreme demands of mountain warfare. The human cost of Gothic Line operations included approximately 15,000 Allied casualties during September and October 1944, representing the systematic price of attacking prepared defensive positions without adequate tactical preparation. The German defensive success inflicted maximum casualties while demonstrating continued Wehrmacht effectiveness despite strategic disadvantages. The operational results validated the defensive value of properly prepared mountain positions while confirming the importance of realistic tactical planning. Rosetti's recognition that the Fifth Army was walking into hell when he observed German defensive preparations on Monte Battaglia proved accurate, as systematic Wehrmacht resistance created tactical conditions that exceeded Allied capabilities for breakthrough operations. His professional assessment of enemy defensive coordination provided valuable intelligence while contributing to revised tactical procedures for subsequent operations. The forward observer's expertise illustrated the continued importance of individual competence in modern warfare. The legacy of Gothic Line operations influenced Allied military doctrine for the remainder of World War II and post-war development of offensive tactics against prepared defensive positions. The systematic German resistance demonstrated the continued effectiveness of defensive warfare while validating the importance of adequate preparation and realistic assessment of enemy capabilities. The tactical lessons learned in the Italian mountains contributed to improved understanding of modern warfare requirements. The morning of September 13, 1944, when Rosetti first observed German 88mm guns positioned on Monte Battaglia, marked the beginning of one of the most challenging tactical situations faced by Allied forces during the Italian campaign. The systematic Wehrmacht defensive preparations created tactical conditions that required fundamental changes in Allied operational procedures while demonstrating continued German military competence. Rosetti's professional recognition of the tactical reality facing the Fifth Army reflected the importance of accurate assessment and realistic planning in military operations. The Gothic Line represented the final major German defensive success in Italy, demonstrating Wehrmacht tactical competence while creating conditions that influenced Allied strategy for the remainder of the European war. The systematic defensive operations validated months of preparation while confirming that properly conducted defensive warfare could achieve significant tactical success despite strategic disadvantages. The operational experience provided valuable lessons about the continued importance of professional military competence in modern warfare,